We often believe we're in full control of our minds, steering our thoughts and actions with conscious intent. But with just a little self-reflection, it becomes clear, in many cases, we're simply following an internal GPS, one far more intricate than we truly understand. What we see is just the screen, a small window into a complex operating system, built upon even more complex machinery. And if we never take the time to understand this system, how it functions, where it's leading us, and how to redirect it when it goes off course, we risk wandering through life without direction, arriving at places that are, at best, uninspiring and at worst, deeply harmful. Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung, one of the most profound minds of the 20th century, dedicated his life to this exact pursuit, to turn inward, explore the psyche from within, and map the inner workings of this hidden navigation system, layer by layer. Early life. Carl Jung was born in 1875 in the small village of Kessel, Switzerland. His father, Paul Jung, was a modest rural pastor, and his mother, Amelie, was a deeply emotional and eccentric woman, prone to depression and mystical visions. As a child, Jung was extremely introverted and often withdrawn. He spent much of his time in solitude, lost in imaginary worlds, indulging in make-believe, and observing the behaviors of the adults around him with quiet intensity. School, however, was a different story. In his early years, Jung struggled both academically and emotionally, disliking school so much that he occasionally fainted to escape it, a pattern bordering on neurosis. But with time, and following a serious conversation with his father about his apparent lack of potential, Jung made a dramatic turn. He began immersing himself in learning, driven by a deep curiosity. He read voraciously, especially philosophical and religious works, laying the intellectual foundation for what would later become his life's work. After finishing secondary school, Jung decided not to follow in his family's footsteps toward a religious career. Instead, he chose to study medicine at the University of Basel. In 1902, after earning his medical degree from the University of Zurich, he began working at a psychiatric hospital, under the mentorship of Eugen Bleller, a highly respected and well-connected figure in the field of psychiatry. A few years later, Jung left the hospital to open his own private practice. As his reputation grew and his ideas gained traction, Jung eventually crossed paths with one of the most influential, groundbreaking, and controversial psychologists of the era, and arguably of all time, Sigmund Freud. Jung and Freud first met in 1907, and their initial conversation lasted nearly 13 hours without pause. That intense exchange sparked a close friendship and professional alliance. They traveled internationally, delivered lectures side by side, exchanged dream interpretations, and debated the depths of the human psyche. But despite their collaboration, an imbalance lingered beneath the surface. Freud, being older and far more established at the time, naturally took on a mentor-like role, creating a dynamic that resembled more of a father-son or teacher-student relationship than an equal partnership. As Jung's reputation grew and his theories began to diverge from Freud's, tensions emerged. Their disagreements deepened, especially over core ideas. Jung's openness to mystical and symbolic interpretations of the mind clashed with Freud's strict, scientific, and reductionist perspective. Eventually, the growing philosophical divide, Jung's push for intellectual independence, and the strain of their unequal relationship led to a final break. In 1913, the once powerful friendship came to an end. Following this split, and largely as a result of it, Jung went through a kind of midlife psychological crisis between 1913 and 1918. During this time, he turned inward, devoting himself to deep self-exploration and documenting psychological experiments he conducted on himself. He delved into the farthest corners of his unconscious mind, seeking to understand its hidden layers. Though marked by emotional turbulence, this period of solitude and inner work became a powerful turning point. It solidified Jung's vision of the psyche, and set the foundation for his path forward, as an independent thinker and pioneer in the field of psychology. The psyche at the heart of Jung's life's work was one central aim: to understand the true nature of the psyche, and to develop theories and practices that could help integrate its many layers into one cohesive, whole self. In Jungian terms, the psyche refers to the entirety of an individual's personality, thoughts, emotions, behaviors, encompassing both the conscious and unconscious mind. For Jung, the ongoing journey of integrating these parts through self-realization and inner awareness wasn't just a psychological process, it was the very purpose of life itself. Becoming a fully realized, authentic human being was the highest goal. As Jung once wrote, man's task is to become conscious of the contents that press upward from the unconscious. As far as we can discern, The sole purpose of human existence is to kindle a light in the darkness of mere being. According to Jung, the psyche is shaped by a constant interaction between the conscious and unconscious realms. Together, they form the full picture of who we are. But much of this development takes place in the unconscious, beyond our immediate awareness or control. As a result, large parts of our true identity, our desires, capabilities, and motivations, remain hidden, operating beneath the surface. To become more whole and authentic, an individual must bring these hidden aspects into conscious awareness, by exploring them and weaving them into their sense of self. Jung referred to this lifelong journey as individuation. To grasp this process more clearly, it helps to look at Jung's structure of the psyche, which he divided into three major levels: consciousness, the personal unconscious, and the collective unconscious. Let's break down these three levels of the psyche, starting with the most familiar. Consciousness is exactly what it sounds like, the realm of our active, personal awareness. It's where we knowingly identify with ourselves and experience the world through our immediate thoughts and perceptions. At the center of this conscious realm lies a key structure Jung identified: the ego. The ego serves as the anchor of our conscious identity. It shapes our sense of individuality and helps us maintain a continuous narrative about who we are. But how the ego expresses itself outwardly is through something Jung called the persona, the social mask we wear. This persona is how we present ourselves to the world, shaped by what we think we should be, rather than who we truly are. Often, the persona doesn't align with the deeper, authentic self. Instead, it reflects the image the ego believes is most acceptable, tailored to fit specific roles, expectations, or cultural norms. To maintain this polished appearance and protect self-esteem, the ego acts as a gatekeeper, allowing certain traits and experiences into conscious awareness while filtering others out. What doesn't fit the ego's narrative gets repressed and pushed down into the unconscious. One of Jung's most groundbreaking and distinctive contributions to psychology was his division of the unconscious into two separate layers: the personal unconscious and the collective unconscious. The personal unconscious closely aligns with ideas proposed by Freud and other thinkers of the time. It's the space just beneath conscious awareness, where the ego stores unwanted or uncomfortable aspects of our experiences and personality, those parts of ourselves we reject or suppress. Though hidden, these repressed elements remain active and continue to influence our thoughts, behaviors, and emotions, interacting constantly with the conscious mind. But Jung took things a step further. The collective unconscious, as he described it, is something far deeper. Unlike the personal unconscious, it doesn't arise from individual experience. Instead, contains universal patterns, fundamental psychological structures inherited through the shared history of humanity. Jung saw it as something similar to biological evolution. Just as we inherit physical traits through our DNA, we also inherit deep-seated mental frameworks, passed down through countless generations. Man has developed consciousness slowly and laboriously, in a process that took untold ages to reach the civilized state, and this evolution is far from complete. For large areas of the human mind are still shrouded in darkness, Jung once observed. According to him, human consciousness evolved over immense spans of time, and much of the mind still remains unexplored, because each generation tends to mirror, in some way, the behaviors and patterns of those before it. This creates an unbroken chain of psychological imitation, stretching all the way back to the dawn of humanity. Over time, this continuous chain has built up a deep reservoir of inherited psychological structures, instincts, and memory patterns. And every human being, by default, taps into this collective inheritance from birth. Jung believed this idea could be observed and supported through real-world evidence, both in his clinical work and his research. In his psychiatric practice, he consistently encountered strikingly similar patterns in the unconscious minds of many different patients. At the same time, his studies in history, mythology, and art revealed recurring symbols, themes, and motifs, appearing across cultures that had no contact with one another. To Jung, this was no coincidence. These shared patterns were manifestations of deep, universal structures within the human psyche, structures he called archetypes. Archetypes, in Jung's model, are the foundational blueprints of the psyche. They predispose us to certain thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, shaping the very core of our personalities. Within this shared unconscious landscape, Jung identified one particularly powerful component: the shadow. The shadow holds all the parts of ourselves we repress, deny, or disown, traits the ego refuses to accept or identify with. Jung believed this idea could be observed and supported through real-world evidence, both in his clinical work and his research. In his psychiatric practice, he consistently encountered strikingly similar patterns in the unconscious minds of many different patients. At the same time, his studies in history, mythology, and art revealed recurring symbols, themes, and motifs appearing across cultures that had no contact with one another. To Jung, this was no coincidence. These shared patterns were manifestations of deep, universal structures within the human psyche, structures he called archetypes. Archetypes, in Jung's model, are the foundational blueprints of the psyche. They predispose us to certain thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, shaping the very core of our personalities. Within this shared unconscious landscape, Jung identified one particularly powerful component, the shadow. The shadow holds all the parts of ourselves we repress, deny, or disown, traits the ego refuses to accept or identify with. The shadow contains all the parts of ourselves we reject, repress, or disown, traits the ego refuses to acknowledge or associate with. Nested within the shadow, Jung identified two specific structures, the anima and the animus. The anima represents the unconscious feminine aspects within a man, while the animus reflects the unconscious masculine traits within a woman. These are often suppressed parts of the psyche, yet they play a vital role in personal integration. According to Jung, all of these psychological components, the ego, persona, shadow, anima, animus, and more, are in constant interaction. Together, they revolve around the central core of the psyche, the self. The self represents the full, authentic totality of who we are, both conscious and unconscious. It is the deeper truth of the individual, what they truly desire, what they genuinely love, and what they're actually capable of becoming. The goal of individuation, then, is to bring the ego, and to a great extent, the persona, into alignment with this inner self. And according to Jung, this alignment is what ultimately leads to a meaningful and fulfilled life.